mean, you just put Wi-Fi and whatever your favorite verb is after it. I like to call this presentation stance. So when I look at that picture, 1969 Ford Mustang, it's got a nice stance, right? Looks good. And the next thing I like to call this presentation is approach. That's a Puma. If it's that close to you, you're in a bad shape, right? And the third piece is tactics. And from my personal experience in working with contractors since we've dove into the world of Wi-Fi, I'm sure right now if any of you are forward-facing your customer or a homeowner and they start asking you questions about your primary lines of business that you know, whether it be irrigation, landscape lighting, hardscape, you're peacocking, right? Your chest is out, your shoulders are back, the feathers are going because you know with absolute certainty that you know more about irrigation than they do. And through observation, when we got thrust into this in June of 16, and I'm going out there with contractors, they don't even notice that the body language, the vocal inflection, and their facial expression is exuding a lack of confidence, right? 65% of communication is nonverbal. People say a lot just by how they stand and how they approach. And through observation, a lot of contractors going up like, hey, what about a Wi-Fi clock? And you just watch contractors start squirming, you know, he's like twitching. He's like, that's new technology. No, it's not. It's been out for 20 years. You know what I mean? And we are missing a huge market opportunity because we don't have the right stance, the right approach, or the right tactics. If you take this to memory and at the conclusion of it, there'll be a QR code on the screen because we want you all to share it with all your customers. A rising tide raises all ships here. Because otherwise, the company that kills us is not going to look like us. All right, so without further ado, I like to talk about what the primary drivers are for homeowners wanting connected devices at their home. Does anyone think a homeowner has to have control of their irrigation system from their smartphone? Not really, right? But it feels good because anything that talks to your smartphone feels good. And there's 35 irrigation controllers out there today that talk to smartphones. Now, some of these stats blew my mind. The one I like to focus on, the average amount of times a person globally checks their smartphone a day, the average. So these are not the bad offenders. I'll tell you about the top 10%, they're bad. The average amount of times, 144 times a day. That's the checking. The average amount of time someone touches their phone in a day is 344. The top 10% touch their smartphone in excess of 5,000 times a day, okay? If you look on here, 75% of people surveyed admit to using their smartphone while they're on the toilet. We call that bad tech hygiene. Don't do it, all right? Some will use their phone, 46% will use their phone while on a date. Don't do that. You're not gonna get repeat business, all right? The other things I like to look at, does anybody get nervous if their phone gets below 20% when that red light comes on? You don't? Man, I do. Who checks their phone within the first 5 minutes of waking up? Anybody? No? I do. It's my alarm clock, right? You think about some of this stuff on here when I'm looking at, this one stood out. It says 57% of the United States considers themselves addicted to their cell phone. Does anybody know what that means? No guesses?
Can't live without it.
That means the other 43% are still living in denial. Okay? This is global smartphone usage along with global population. Last year in December of 2022, the 8th billionth child was born. Okay? Right now, 86% of the 8.1 billion on the planet have a smartphone. I'm here to tell you, not that many people have a house over their head, right? Or food in their stomach, but they have a smartphone. You think about it. The average American replaces their smartphone every 2.5 years. They spend an average of $1,000 on that phone, and then they spend an upwards of $1,200 to $1,500 a year for the data plan. They're $2,400 to $2,500 in before they pay the mortgage, before they buy diapers or groceries for their family. It's an absolute obsession, but nobody talks about it because we're all part of it, right? But that really is the primary driver for this technology. Now, when you look at smart home and smartphone stats, the average amount of screen time globally is 5 hours and 24 minutes today, all right? Does anybody like to sleep in this room? Anybody getting 8? Getting 8? Right on. All right, I'm envious. So that's 22% of your 24 hours in a day. But if you're sleeping 8, that's 1/3 of the time you're awake that your face is buried in a smartphone, right? So if you want to meet your customer where they're at, we can talk about that in a different presentation. That's where they're at. 70% of all media today is not gathered around the boob tube anymore, right? Or whatever they used to call it. You know, the LCD TV where the whole family's going around. No. 70% of all media consumption is happening on a smartphone today. Matter of fact, 56% of all internet browsing is happening on a smartphone. So it's eclipsed the desktop computer. And it's only getting worse. So we talk about stance, approach, and tactics. I read this article from TechC, I think it was 2021, like Q4 2021. It was 3,000 homeowners and 20 smart home manufacturers. And when I read this, it gave me confidence because the first one that popped up was that 55% of the 3,000 consumers surveyed admitted having difficulty installing smart home devices. And that to me was a sigh of relief because I didn't have experience and I'm going hat in hand with the contractor to attempt to make this hardware connect to their Wi-Fi. And I'm like, all right, only half of them know more than me. You know, it's a coin flip, right? The other one that instilled some confidence in me is 62% of those people surveyed out of the 3,000 admitted to returning smart home devices that were unused. Anybody know why? You bet. Could not figure it out, and you know what? We're just gonna put it back in the box and silently push it across the counter at the Geek Squad. That's it. The next one, out of the 20 smart home manufacturers, and we experience this at Hunter all the time as well, and I think Dave was touching on it earlier. Out of the defective stuff that comes back to these 20 manufacturers, when they go through their defective pile, 70% of it is actually defect-free. What's that tell you? Again, couldn't figure it out. It was easier to go back and just say, doesn't work, right? It's easy to return stuff on Amazon and say defective. Pick it up. So this is what gets me out of bed in the morning. This is what makes me about 10 inches taller than I actually am here today. The smart home market in 2022, just in retail sales, not the actual labor to install the smart home devices from home automation companies, your green industry professionals, $100 billion. You guys want your piece of that 100 billion. Hunter wants their piece of the 100 billion. The only way we get it is through training our contractor partners. If they don't have the tribal knowledge and the SOPs in hand to do it, there's a bottleneck happening. And that is where I am seeing the tech sector starting to eat our lunch. Tech folks are doing our hardware installation for a fraction of what we would charge. And it's not good. We'll kind of get into that a little bit more. This is what really gets me excited. In 3 years, that smart home market's going to grow by $40 billion. Again, the only way we eat is through the contractors, so we got to teach. Now, there's a survey. Anybody get the IA magazine, that news publication? Okay. Confession, it was nothing more than a spot for me to set my coffee mug on until 2020. And then I was home a lot, and I started flipping through it. And there's a killer survey they put out in Q4 of every year, and it scopes across 1,600 contractors from all 50 states. And in there, this stat jumped out at me. This was the one from fall of last year. Out of the 1,600 surveyed, 49% said that less than 25% of their customers have smart working Wi-Fi controllers. This is the least amount of labor that it's going to take. It's year-round work. If you're in a seasonal market, we're talking a screw gun, a level, and a smartphone. But wait, you don't even need a level anymore because there's an app on your smartphone that turns it into a level, right? This is low-hanging fruit work that contractors are walking by because they're not confident. So, the company that kills you will look nothing like you. Meet the company that will kill our contractors right here. I live in a pretty major metro, right? Chicagoland area, and I went on Amazon and I just typed in Wi-Fi irrigation controller. Take your pick. There's 35 flavors that pop up. That's how I came up with that number. So I put one in my cart, and right down at the bottom it says suggested, Amazon Home Services. So I clicked on it, right? It popped up, it said upfront pricing, easy to schedule, hand-picked pros, happiness guarantee. Within 5 minutes, I got 2 phone calls, both from non-green industry manufacturers that were willing to come to my house and cook the steak that I bought directly from Amazon for $80. I don't think anybody in this room gets out of bed for $80. I certainly don't, but that's who's going to eat our lunch. If I was a smart contractor, I'd be calling Amazon to become their preferred installer, right? Maybe a little less margin, but you make it up in the overall revenue. It was, this happens. Don, I'm sure you've seen it before, and it's common, and I've done it. I've been in this industry my entire life. When we verbally devalue the services we provide, people expect them to be inexpensive. And we don't do it by design or by intention, but we do it all the time, right? Because words are powerful, especially when we're engaging with the general public. If it's something in the irrigation world, you know, a contractor might just say, geez, you know what, we got to put another head over there, get you a little bit more water, right? There's a difference between saying that and saying, hey, we got some problems with the precipitation rate and uniformity and coverage on this particular zone. The infiltration rate of your soil, we got to do something in the words of a cycle and soak, maybe go with a high efficiency nozzle that has a slower precip so the water's not running off. Language. Language is important. So the first thing you want to know in the world of IoT, how many of you have been belittled by an IT professional at some point in time? They come in last, right, peacocking, right, and using acronyms that you don't know and you don't understand. And I've been in that hot seat. So I've infiltrated them at their coffee shops and everywhere else, and I'm hanging out in their circles, GeekWire, reading their blogs. I wear a wig when I do it, so I fit in. I got my man bun up top, right? But what I do is I take the information from those meetings that I find of value and I dismiss the rest. So I'm giving you a tight script for you to follow, okay? And I only want you to focus on 4 of these acronyms, so I'm just gonna make the rest disappear. SSID. That is the tech way of asking for someone's network name, okay? Very simple. We need to use professional terms. The next one is RSSI. It stands for Received Signal Strength Indicator. It's the mannerism in which we read potency of Wi-Fi at a specific location, and that's critical. We're going to get into it. ISP, everybody knows, Internet Service Provider. The 4th one, the WAP. That's what the nerds call it, okay? Wireless Access Point. It's where's the modem, where's the router. So if I approach Reed and I come to his house to install a Wi-Fi controller, first thing we know for sure is that all the quality contractors are really busy, right, if I'm there. But I want to create separation from Reed, and I also am looking for opportunities to educate the customer, because anytime you educate the customer, there's a paradigm shift. You give them a warm, hugging feeling going, I hired the right company to do the job because I don't know what he just said. And that's exactly the situation. I show up at Reed's house, I say, hey Reed, it's Kevin from Kevin's Irrigation. Couple of things before we get going. I need to know where your WAP is, who's your ISP, what's your SSID, and where's your clock, because I need to test your RSSI. Is your average homeowner going to know those acronyms? And that's exactly what we want. That's the response. We want the contractors to see the homeowners glossed over, because now it's very easy to unpack and say, I'm sorry, Reed, just need to know where your modem and router is, who your internet service provider is, the name of your network, because I need to go where your controller's at to test the potency of the Wi-Fi to make sure the clock's going to work when I plug it in, right? And right then and there, I mean, as long as you leave and that clock works, you're getting a good Google review. They're going to tell the neighbor about you. You know, you want to put people in a place of comfort. When they're in a place of comfort, they want to buy. And when you do right by somebody, they want to tell others, right? And that is the spirit of a rising tide raising all ships. A big mistake. And it's just like, you know, if you're putting in an irrigation system, a lot of contractors will put in their contract, hey, I need 10 gallons per minute, 1-inch tap, and 50 PSI, right? And if you can't check all those boxes, we got things to resolve it. We can give you a booster pump. We can do all sorts of things. But this is baseline of what I need if you want a functioning irrigation system. If you go to our website, hydrowise.com, and you simply type in network requirements, there's a PDF document that spits out. Every one of our contractors should put that in their contract. That is them telling the customer, if you want a working Wi-Fi controller, this is what you must provide me with. You're defining it and putting it in the contract, so you're coming to the table with a look and a feel that's much more professional than probably half the other irrigation contractors they're dealing with, if not all of them. The next one, and this, I didn't think it was a big deal, but in 2022, 70% of all cybersecurity attacks were residential, right? And internet service providers are doing the right thing. They're beefing up security through firewalls to protect it. But you gotta place yourself in the position of a consumer. And if I'm a consumer and the contractor I'm hiring to put something on my local area network includes the network requirements and the security statement, That feels like a warm hug, right? Because most people can Google like I did and find out that 70% of cybersecurity attacks are residential. So knowing about the security statement for the hardware that you're going to put on my network puts me at ease a little bit. You know, we got to look at the whole sales cycle from the consumer stance. So in these next couple of slides, we're going to talk about basic hardware that everyone has at their home that has Wi-Fi, but I want to break it down in a very simplistic manner so you know the primary function of these pieces of equipment and how they work. So the first thing we see on the screen is a modem, right? The MO in the word modem stands for modulation. And the DEM in the word modem stands for demodulation. And all a modem truly is a translator. It's taking digital information from the internet and it's translating it into analog information. That's it. Takes one language in, spits a secondary language out. Now all modems are accompanied by a router, right? And a router is what broadcasts Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi is not revolutionary. Matter of fact, Wi-Fi is nothing more than radio frequency with invisible analog data packets going back and forth between the hardware and the router. So it's just plain old radio frequency. Translator is the modem, taking digital, making it analog, and the router's spitting it out through the middle of the air in these invisible little data packets. And what no internet service provider will ever tell you is that every single piece of hardware on your network, whether you're running your clock or not, whether if your TV's powered on, your kid's gaming console, every single one of those pieces of hardware is like a 3-year-old kid in a cereal aisle. They're having a meltdown. They're all looking for, they're all attempting to communicate with the router simultaneously. The router does not diminish in its ability to interface with multiple people at the same time. However, we in our device-obsessed culture tax the router more and more every year with more hardware. And they all have a ceiling, right? They all can only do about so much. So when we get into what that looks like, my coworker Greg Rosink, he and his fiance have 35 connected devices at their home. Can anybody take a guess as to what the average is in the United States today?
12, 2 or 3,
25. Now think about this. It's just me and my 5-year-old daughter, right? And I'm in a 3-story townhome, and I have 27. And when I started thinking about it, I got those little LED can lights, right? Each one of those is a piece of hardware on my network. I got 12 of those just from that, right? So when you think about that, it adds up quickly. And again, we take a look at this router right here I pulled up, right? I went on the A train. It's got a 50,000 reviews, and out of 50,000 reviews, it's got 4.5 stars. Under $100, $84.99, and Amazon's choice. That's in the box, right? I'm buying it, done. 20 devices, that's the ceiling. I will not show you anything in this presentation that I did not look ridiculously stupid in the field learning. And I'm going to tell you this one. 2.5 hours with a contractor several years ago trying to get a controller onto the Wi-Fi network. We had a potent enough signal, we had the proper bandwidth, we had everything we needed, right password, but we couldn't connect, and when we did connect, it would drop off real quick. And I mean, you know the look. The homeowner is just looking at us going, oh my God, these two are idiots, and I hired the wrong company. I know he's wearing a jumpsuit that says Hunter like that box, but he's stupid, clearly, right? So after 2.5 hours, I went to the wireless access point, to the WAP, right? I flipped the router over, I pulled out my phone, and I typed in the model number into Google, and I looked at the specs for the router. It had a ceiling. 20 devices was the ceiling. Now, we didn't know it at the moment, but we were trying to connect the 21st. Because when we turned to the homeowner and said, Mrs. Jones, how many pieces of hardware you got on your network? She's like, I think like 10. Took her a half hour to figure out she had 20, right? And that was the hit. But the moment that you or your contractor takes the controller out of the box and mounts it on the wall, you just made a promise. You made a promise that when you leave, there's going to be a working Wi-Fi controller, and anything short of that is a bad customer experience, it's a bad Google review, and they're going to talk on you to the neighbors and say, this idiot from Hunter in a jumpsuit, I thought he knew what he was doing, but he clearly didn't, right? Again, we need to know It's different than irrigation, it's different than hardscape, but it's not complex, and this is where the market opportunity lies. The easiest market opportunity in an industry where the 800-pound gorilla is labor, right? Everybody's trying to figure out how to make more money with less people, and I'm looking at the stats going 1,600 contractors, and half of them are saying less than 25% of their clients have Wi-Fi controllers. It's huge market opportunity. So I'll continue to be the evangelist until I see that number in the corrective action mode. So this is your basic setup. Anybody not have Wi-Fi at your house? If you don't, I'm jealous. That's where I want to be when I retire. Soup can with a string. That's how you get me, right? Okay, so this is your basic setup. You got a modem and a router. This is your Batman and Robin. If you like SNL from the back in the day, that would be like Tan Man and Lotion Boy, right? You got your translator, got your conversationalist, and then we're talking out to the hardware. Now, sometimes the conversationalist and the router, right, or the router is the conversationalist, and the translator coexist as one piece of hardware. Typically when you see this, it's going to be from the internet service provider. You are never going to find the best-in-class router that also is a modem. And it's a play, right? Internet service providers are for-profit organizations. I will tell you, when I switched, I'm going to leave the manufacturer's name out, but when I switched to streaming everything 5 years ago, and I was on the phone with the ISP, and I asked about renting hardware, the modem and router, and straight, she goes, "Oh, honey, are you going to be streaming everything?" I said, "Yeah, I'm all in. I'm all in. I dropped cable." She goes, "Don't rent our equipment. It's garbage." She straight away told me that on the phone, right? And the thing of it is, the ceilings on a lot of those ISPs hardware is much lower. And you got to be prepared for this conversation because homeowners, the ones paying for the most high-speed internet in the world, if they have a bad router, it's like trying to cut your ribeye with a butter knife. It's going to be a long meal. So be prepared tactically when you go to a homeowner and tell them they have bad Wi-Fi. I mean, that's like saying their kid's ugly. You know what I mean? These days they're going to throw a punch. So you got to be prepared to defend your position when you engage in that conversation. So that's a little less common. Now, what we run into, because the hardware we're tasked with getting on someone's wireless local area network is never close in proximity to the wireless access point, right? Irrigation controller's in the garage. It's on the backside of the garage. It's, who knows where. So we're going to get familiar with what we call Wi-Fi signal enhancers and Wi-Fi boosters. I know do y'all stock them and sell them today? Okay, I'm not encouraging you to, but I want you to know how they operate. In general, a Wi-Fi booster is nothing more than a radio enhancer, okay? It's a catch and release type situation. And a general rule, they're not all created equal, but a general rule is that a Wi-Fi booster is going to increase your area coverage by roughly 50%, okay? And when we look at what we call a mesh network, does anyone own a mesh network at their home? Okay, Don's got one here, 2, 3, all right? 10 years ago, to get a mesh network cost you thousands of dollars, all right? And the theory behind a mesh network, in very simplistic terms, you have your primary access point. So you got your translator, right, your modem, and you got your router, you got your conversationalist. That doesn't change. Same thing straight away. Now these devices are called nodes. They look just like a Wi-Fi booster. But the difference is a Wi-Fi booster is going to increase you by 50%, and a node on a mesh network replicates the original signal from the router. So it increases by 100%. And what you can't do with a Wi-Fi booster, daisy chain multiples together, you can indeed do on a mesh network, hence larger area of coverage, right? Everybody see that? It's like head-to-head, no dead zones, right? We've got head-to-head coverage everywhere. It's as if every time you plug a node in on a mesh network, it's as if you're moving the rotor and modem right to that outlet in terms of speed and area of coverage. To give you an idea, Amazon's home brand, look, only one company pays me, Hunter, right? But I talk from experience, not theory. So I'm going to tell you about the things I've used and tried and to what degree of success I have or haven't had. So I've tried 2 mesh networks. The Orbi system, that's Costco's home brand, for the router in 2 nodes, it'll cost you about $375. And then from that point forward, you can buy more nodes as needed. My house only needs 3 right now, but I can add another one. They are plug and play. When you plug it in, it's going to give you a red light telling you it's not close enough to get the signal from the other node or the primary access point, or a green light saying I'm good to go. I mean, it is literally that simple. The other one that's actually lesser in cost is the Eero system. The Eero system is Amazon's home brand. You can get a router and 2 nodes for $179. Again, plug and play. Now they don't, when we do this a year from now, I'm gonna tell you about all the bad stuff on mesh networks, right? Because I learn from phone calls that come in from contractors when they're in a jam. And so the mesh network is not the cure-all. It does increase your area coverage, but there are some Achilles heels to them. My primary reason for showing you the 3 different flavors is I want you to be most familiar with what you're gonna walk into in a residential application. You know, so when you see, if I didn't show you the mesh network, you'd be like, what in the hell? He's got all these Wi-Fi boosters? So those are the main ones you're gonna see residentially speaking. So when we look at the router, the conversationalist, if the router's been manufactured in the last 2 decades, it's what's called dual band, okay? It has the capability of talking in at least broadcasting 2 different bandwidths, right? 2 different radio frequencies. The original one when Wi-Fi came out was 2.4, okay? 5 gigahertz is the other one. When COVID hit, we got 6, we got 60 gigahertz. There's a whole bunch, but you probably won't run into those in an average residential application. But what you do need to know is if you're working with Centrellis Wi-Fi, you're working with HydroWise Wi-Fi, or you're working with Luxor Wi-Fi, we need 2.4, gospel according to Kevin, okay? 5 is not bad, but there are some fundamental differences between the 2. And again, I seek every and any opportunity to educate the consumer. And they get tripped up on this sometimes. So this is really empowering for the contractor. On the left-hand side of the screen, or right-hand side where I'm standing, you've got a depiction of the distance that those bandwidths travel from the wireless access point. And it's just a fact. 2.4 gigahertz bandwidth travels 3 times the distance from the wireless access point. That is the primary reason why Hunter Industries has aligned ourselves with 2.4 gigahertz bandwidth, okay? Now, you might hear from some people, hey, 5 gigahertz better. Yes and no. 5 gigahertz is not better if we got hardware that's on the outside of the garage or outside of the home, right? 5 gigahertz does not travel through floors as well. It only travels 1/3 of the distance of 2.4. However, if you have a gaming console or you're streaming movies or you're uploading and downloading a lot of content, a lot of data, you want to be on 5 because 5 is faster. Good news for everybody in the room, whether it's landscape lighting or irrigation control or stick-up cameras or your refrigerator and microwave that are on Wi-Fi, it's all low data demand. We don't need high demand in terms of data. But if you hooked your kid's gaming console to 2.4 and he's playing Call of Duty with his buddies, his screen's gonna be buffering and his buddies are like, no, you got shot 3 rooms ago. You know what I mean? It's just not gonna keep up, all right? So sometimes consumers will get confused with the term 5G and 5 gigahertz. That's an educational opportunity for a contractor. If a homeowner does pop off like that, you're like, I think you mean 5 gigahertz because 5G simply stands for 5th generation mobile network, period. So 5G and 5 gigahertz are not in the same section of the library. Matter of fact, they're not even in the same library, right? 5 gigahertz is a unit of measurement and frequency in the billions, and that's how we measure radio frequency in decibels. So we're gonna talk on that. Now, if this was 2017 and I was doing this training, I'd still be 5'6" and a half, standing on a 1-foot box, but I'd have a little bit more hair. Okay? And what I would tell you to do is I would say when you go to your client's home and you want to test Wi-Fi, let's go ahead and go to your settings on your smartphone and toggle on Wi-Fi, and then I want you to place your smartphone on the cabinet of the controller that you want to replace. And if you got full bars, man, you're good to go. And if you only got 1 bar missing, you should be okay. Now, when I sat down, I was on a project in St. Louis, Missouri when I met my friend Warren White, who's a home house automation specialist. And he took to me. He wanted to learn landscape lighting, and I wanted to learn about Wi-Fi and connected devices. And so every month when I came to town, he'd slot out a few hours for me and take me down and learn me how a bit. And what I quickly learned is he said, Kev, it's a primitive mannerism in which you're reading Wi-Fi. He said the pros read it in decibels. And he said, and the other thing, with your hardware only going on 2.4, unless the ISP, when they name the SSID, put something at the end saying 2.4 or 5, you don't know the difference. And here's the horrific thing, and this is what stops contractors from capitalizing on this. If they're out at the site and they see the SSID pop up, because the touch screen on HydroWise will show you 5 gigahertz and 2.4, even if it's not labeled properly. And it'll even let you tap on a 5 gigahertz network, and it'll even prompt you to put in the password. But when you put in the password, the wheel of death just spins and spins and spins until the homeowner goes, oh my God, this guy's an idiot and I hired the wrong contractor, right? So that it's important to know the difference between the two. So when we talk about 2.4 gigahertz bandwidth, if you are an iPhone user, burn this into your frontal lobe now. 2.4 gigahertz bandwidth is always going to be channels 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, or 11. That never changes. Doesn't matter who your ISP is. Doesn't matter who the manufacturer is of your router. 1 through 11 equals 2.4. Just remember that component, okay? Now, the best channels out of those 11 is 1, 6, and 11 because they're what we call non-overlapping. During the troubleshooting portion of this segment, I'll tighten you up on that, okay? We're gonna pass it over now. This is my kind of slide because I'm dyslexic and I like pictures, right? So when my buddy Warren White first told me the term RSSI, I said, wait, does that stand for really super strong internet? And he's like, not really, but kinda, Kev, you're close, right? Gospel according to me. In a moment, everybody's gonna have an app on your phone to read Wi-Fi bandwidth in decibels. And the best reading you're ever gonna get, if you take this home and you set your smartphone directly on top of your wireless access point, you might get about -30 RSSI. That's perfect, okay? Acceptable is anywhere from -30 all the way about to -70, all right? I would not install a controller without having a hard conversation with the client if I read beyond -70. That's your 1 bar, no bar territory. It will connect, but guess what? It's going to disconnect and reconnect and disconnect and reconnect. And if you didn't have the conversation with the homeowner, they think you're an idiot, okay? So you got to identify their problems before they become your problems. So with that said, I know I have a strong personality, so I like to give you some third-party comparative data, all right? This website, iNetworks, they say the weakest signal they'd ever recommend connecting to is -67. So we're about 3 decibels in dispute at this point. But, you know, 6 one, half dozen the other. Anybody ever the movie Predator? Remember that one? Oh, yeah. All right. Yeah, remember the Predator view? That kind of reminds me of like the Predator vision. But what it is it's a mesh network, right? And each one of those stars is a node on a mesh network. Now, can anyone take a guess and tell me where they think -70 is in those circles? Where do you think it starts? There's no wrong answer.
Orange going to the yellow.
Orange to the yellow, all right. Who's that? Who else?
Dark yellow.
Dark yellow? Teal to blue. We have a winner. That's -70. The reason I put this slide up is check this out, right? You can look at how much further from -70 you can actually pick up Wi-Fi. And you could absolutely get a piece of hardware to connect in this danger zone, but it is going to be a bad relationship between the homeowner and you if you put any hardware beyond -70, because it is going to intermittently drop off. And there are things in every residential home that inadvertently can affect the Wi-Fi signal, right? And just mess with radio frequency. So now's the time. How many Apple users? iPhones? Show of hands. All right, Android people, take a nap. This is going to be a minute. When you see the smoke starting to come out of the top of the iPhone users' heads, that's when I call an audible and I switch to you, so be ready, okay? All right, I want you to go to the App Store on your iPhone and type in Airport Utility. Now, this is also the part where I like to break because this is where you got to call your significant other to find out what your Apple ID is and the password because you don't know either of them. All right, so if you can't do it now, it's not a big deal. Like I said, I'll put a QR up for this presentation. You can grab it off YouTube or Facebook. So just give me a nod when you're there. Got a few? All right, I'm getting some nods. All right, before you open the app, too late, you already did. One step ahead of me. There is a critical step that you must complete, all right? And the critical step is to go into the settings on your smartphone. So that's the portion on the left-hand side there. And you want to scroll down till you get to your apps. You'll know you're at your apps because they're in alphabetical order, and you're going to see Airport Utility relatively close to the top of that. What I'd like you to do is tap on Airport Utility under Settings, and then you're going to see this screen on the right-hand side. And half to 3/4 of the way down the screen, depending on what iPhone you have, you want to toggle on the Wi-Fi scanner. Okay? If you neglect to toggle on the Wi-Fi scanner, congratulations, you have another useless app on your phone that will never work. I've done this presentation a lot, and I can tell you right now, I'm hoping you guys are the first, I've never not had a group or somebody text me or DM me a day later and go, with their screenshot, and I can tell that they didn't open the Wi-Fi scanner because it doesn't have the button for you to scan. You know, so it is a critical step. Make sure you force your customers to do this in front of you, because otherwise they're going to, again, all they need is one bad customer experience and they will walk away from this market opportunity, right? Because nobody wants to look stupid, especially repetitively, except for me. I'm good with it. All right, now, once you toggle hot that Wi-Fi scanner, in the upper right-hand corner it says Wi-Fi scan. When you are on site, if it's a new installation, figure out where you want to hang the controller, because we need to test the bandwidth. But if you're replacing an existing controller, you want to literally place your smartphone on top of the cabinet of the box you're going to replace. Not in your hand 5 feet away from it, because I want to read bandwidth right here, right exactly where we're swapping out. And then you're going to hit Wi-Fi scan, and then you'll see this screen, and then in the same spot, hit scan. Now what you've just done is you have turned your smartphone into a receiving beacon that can pick up anything that's broadcasting a Wi-Fi signal. Now, all things that broadcast Wi-Fi do not take you to the internet, right? I have a wireless printer in my basement, and it takes you to the printer, right? I have a Luxor at my house, and if I put it on standalone mode, it's going to broadcast a Wi-Fi signal, letting smartphones talk to it, but not to the cloud, all right? So when we do this, there are 3 critical data points we're looking for, okay? I like to run this test for no less than 3 minutes, and I'll tell you why in a moment. The first data point I'm looking for is the SSID. That's going to be in bold print, all right? Make sure you're looking at the right network. I don't tell you unless it's happened. I have been at job sites reading SSID and bandwidth, and I've checked all the boxes, and I'm like, we're good to go. Come to find out, it was the neighbor's Wi-Fi. The neighbor's Wi-Fi was actually stronger at this person's home than their own, right? And I naturally assumed the one that's the most potent must be theirs. So don't assume. Know the SSID. The second data point is the RSSI. This one happens to be -41. Will that work? Absolutely. Remember, -70 or closer to 0. Always a negative number because we read in decibels. The third data point is the channel. Does anybody remember what channels are acceptable that we know it's 2.4? 1 through 11, that's right. So channel 9, good to go. However, if I just close the app right now, all I got was a snapshot of where the Wi-Fi was at that very moment. I want to run it for 3 minutes. The reason I like to run it for 3 minutes, and then I will hit the screen and touch it, and you will see here a time-lapse view of where the RSSI has been. It gives you a reading every 2 to 5 seconds. So if you run a 3-minute test, one of the biggest culprits to knock down Wi-Fi is the microwave oven. It omits radio frequency, and I like that 3 minutes because typically if somebody's nuking something, it's not longer than 3 minutes, right? So for that reason, that's why I like that duration of time. So we want to check the box. So if you see, hey, -60, and then there's like a little blip on the radar that goes to -80, but it comes right on back down. If the vast majority of the readings you're seeing are on the good side, you're good. If it's not, this is where I'm screenshotting, texting, emailing, or going to the client and having a conversation about their problem before it becomes mine when I hang the hardware on the wall, right? We've got it, and we're going to have to help land the plane. All right, iPhone users, I can see the smoke, decompress. No? We're good? All right, Android users, where are we at? Much easier, and it's a sexier app. And I am an Apple person, but I got to admit, I bought an Android tablet for 90 bucks just when I'm out in the field running this test with contractors because the optics on it are way cooler, and it has a simple mode. So Wi-Fi Analyzer is what you want to type in the Google Play Store. Now be careful when you do it. You're going to see 4 or 5 different flavors of Wi-Fi Analyzer. Choose the one that has the exact icon you see on the screen. It has between 4.6 and 4.9 stars, all right? And that's not a bad thing. Now, when you open the app, congratulations, you don't have to go to your settings and toggle on a Wi-Fi scanner. Not necessary. This is what you're going to see. I like to go, there's icons across the top. I'm going to tell you to hit the one on the far right, which looks like a circle, and then it gives you a tachometer view, right? So my RSSI is on the far right. It's -40. Will that work? Absolutely. And then over here, FBI 2.4, that is the SSID in yellow. And then channel 4, is that 2.4? 1 through 11, remember? But here's the cool part about Android. They have a toggle switch at the top. This one says 2.4 and 5. If you just downloaded the app, you got 2.4, 5, and 6 gigahertz. If you touch 2.4, it'll turn blue. And guess what else? It'll only show you 2.4 gigahertz bandwidth. So it makes all the 5s and everything else that won't work disappear. So you're only looking at the SSIDs that have the proper bandwidth for you to connect our hardware. Does that make sense? Cool. Anyone with an Android phone having an issue right now? All right. You guys are pros. Now, we just know the nature of our stuff. If I was going to give you a boilerplate answer as to where you install a Wi-Fi booster, the boilerplate answer is halfway between the hardware and the wireless access point. However, there's a better way. Now remember, when you got to go to your client and tell him you can't deliver on what he hired you to do that day, you got to be ready to defend your positioning, okay? And come to the table with solutions. So what I would recommend, if you're doing your bandwidth and you have no signal where the hardware's at, or you got a weak signal, what you want to do is go to where the wireless access point is. Open up Wi-Fi Analyzer or Airport Utility, okay? You're going to be reading about -30. Begin to slowly walk. I don't know if I can step on that, probably not. Okay. Slowly walk in the direction of the hardware that you want to connect on the network, right? And when you get to an RSSI in the -60s, stop and look for outlets. That is where you want to suggest they install their Wi-Fi booster, right? Because if halfway between, right, if let's say this is the halfway point, great. We install the booster that has a great connection to the hardware, but it has an intermittent connection to the wireless access point. So it would behoove us to ever install a Wi-Fi signal enhancer outside of -60 RSSI. We just moved the problem a little bit further down the road. Does that make sense? Now, I read these news publications so you don't have to. GeekWire tells me that in theory, you could install back-to-back Wi-Fi boosters. However, they say don't do it because you will have a lot of intermittent drop-off. So if you get into a sitch where you can't land the plane for your client with one Wi-Fi signal enhancer, that's where you want to engage with them about the conversation of perhaps upgrading to a mesh network, all right? Remember, a node on a mesh network is going to increase the Wi-Fi area of coverage by 100%. A Wi-Fi signal enhancer or Wi-Fi booster is going to increase it by 50, and you're only limited to one in that direction, right? So Wi-Fi boosters are not all created equal. I'm here to tell you that I have bought Wi-Fi boosters for upwards of $200, and it was absolute crap. And I have paid $20 for a Wi-Fi signal enhancer that was legit. Even if you don't want to buy things on Amazon, use it for the reviews, okay? Case in point, they're not all created equal. This one right here, 100,000 reviews, 4 stars, 20 devices maximum, right? Just like a router, just like that wireless access point, it's got a ceiling. You know, we know we're only going to get so many gallons per minute through 1-inch PVC, no matter how hard we try. Over here, this one, 25 devices. This one down here, 140,000 reviews, 4 stars, $17.99. I would feel comfortable recommending that to a homeowner for something that talks on 2.4 because that device only talks on 2.4 bandwidth. So if you were trying to hook your kid's gaming console through a booster, that particular one would not work. So we got to read the specs, right? Very simple. Now that you guys know what's important and what we need to look for, it's just a matter of reading the specs, or the greatest book never read, also known as the owner's manual, okay? But please don't read it. It gives me job security, all right? All right. That's number one offender right there, the good old nuker. If you're running a bandwidth test while that bad boy's running, it could give you some fictitious readings, right? Now, we got a couple of young people in the room, all right? For the young folks in the room, that's how we used to talk, all right? That, believe it or not, a cordless phone, both the handheld unit and the base communicate with radio frequency, all right? And so that could cause you to see some fictitious readings if you were doing a bandwidth and signal strength test simultaneously where they were on the squawk box, all right? So just be cognizant of that. Other things that interfere with Wi-Fi, again, it's radio frequency, pretty obvious. Stone, brick, metal roofs, Fish tanks, I learned that one the hard way. Line of sight fish tanks will absolutely knock down a Wi-Fi signal pretty firmly. LED TVs also, if it's line of sight, will knock them down. About a year and a half ago, or no, it's almost about a year and a half ago at the IA show, I was talking, a tech guy was watching my presentation and he said, add mirrors to your presentation because mirrors in line of sight will absolutely kill Wi-Fi too. Now, I was FaceTiming with my daughter the other day and she's 5 and she said, Daddy, am I going to be in your presentation today? And I said, yeah, you'll be in it, Charlie. So she's in it and I put her in it because we knock down Wi-Fi frequency. 2.4 travels better through us than 5 does, but I put this offer out to everyone. I'll put it out to y'all as well because I've never had to pay. If you go anywhere that has free Wi-Fi, whether it be a hotel, whether it be Starbucks or anywhere else, if you find the WAP, the wireless access point on the floor, take a picture of it, text me or DM me, and I will send you a crisp, clean $100 bill. I'm quite certain I'll never pay because Wi-Fi, wireless access points in commercial sites are always going to be up in the rafters, allowing that bandwidth to get out, right? If they were on the floor, we need 3 times as many because they got to penetrate us. As I look in this room, just take a peek right back there on the wall. There's the wireless access point in this room. There's another one right over there in that corner. So you got 2 WAPs in this room, and they're covering the entire room, right? And we got quite a bit of square footage here. If they were on the floor, we'd probably need 3 or 4. It's just common sense type stuff. So, no Wi-Fi, no problem, all right? I'm going to go third party on you for a minute here. Here's what you need to know about hotspot usage. Number 1, if you're installing Hunter HydroWise hardware, 500 megabytes a month. That's how much data they're going to consume. So when you go to get your data plan, 500 megabytes a month. Now be careful. If you go to an ISP or a cell provider and you ask for 500 megabytes a month, they're going to laugh at you. They're going to laugh at you because the smallest data plan they sell is about 4 times that. Okay? Again, our product is very low data demand. Number 2, do not ever, I literally had somebody DM me this morning during the first session and he goes, hey man, I got a hotspot and this thing's timing out like every 3 weeks. And I DM'd him back, I go, does it have a battery? Yeah, I said, that's the problem. If a hotspot has an internal battery, it is telling you, I'm temp use, man. I'm a couple hours, shut me down and use me as you want. I'm not meant to run 24/7. So what happens with the ones with internal battery is if you use them 24/7, at some stage in the game, they take a timeout. And when they take that time out, it means you got to drive out to that site and cycle power on it to get that connectivity back. The other issue that'll come up, it's going to take a little longer to happen, is you're going to be powering this thing all the time, right? And when you power it all the time, that battery inside the hotspot's going to swell. And after a while, it's going to cause it to fail. So these 2 flavors on the screen both work well. I have contractors with a multitude of them in the field. They are both what we call continual run hotspots, all right? You can buy them on Amazon. And you take your SIM card from your data provider, right? Insert it in there, and you're up and running. Both these flavors, too, will fit inside of an HCC controller. That's one thing I like about it. It's discreet. But no, it needs power, so it needs a receptacle where you're all going to plug it in, right? Now, a couple of years ago, I ran into this outfit. They were at the IA show. They're called OpConnect, all right? OpConnect, their primary deal is machine-to-machine connectivity. They're in the IoT world. ATMs is what is like their bread and butter, and then they do things with the grocery industry. They made their way into the irrigation industry about 5 or 6 years ago. Here's a couple of things I like about this organization, because their hardware costs a little bit more. Number 1, 24/7 live tech support. That's big to me. They make a Neiman 3 rated enclosure for their hotspot. Cost a little bit more, but it works. I don't talk about what I don't test. I have had their hotspot at my home operating for some time now. I know a multitude of contractors that have used it as well. It costs more than those other 2 flavors I showed you, but you got a box, and you know it's going to work at the end of the day. So any one of those 3 will work. 500 megabytes a month, and do not use a hotspot that has an internal battery unless you like a lot of back-forth trips, okay? That's what you want to advise the contractors. We just can't spread that word enough, right? So, if you are willing to take a peek at our other remote access software, Centrellis, and you feel really good when you put in everything that says Hunter because you only have 1 rep to scream and yell at if it doesn't work, right? So you don't have to call OpConnect and us. then I have a solution for you. As y'all know, that IC2 controller we talked about earlier, you can walk up to a 25-year-old one, pop in the new FacePack ribbon cable and module, or if you bought a new one today, we got 3 methods to get you to the cloud. We have a Wi-Fi antenna, we have hardwire LAN, local area network. You can run an Ethernet cable from an access point, maximum 300 feet, right into the box, and then you can get the clock to the cloud. The third option is the Hunter Cell Kit. It comes with a SIM card inside of it. And when you're going to set it up, it's going to have you pull out your credit card and give your credit card number because it's going to charge $120 a year, $10 a month. You can do it monthly, quarterly, or annually. Okay? That's a third party. We don't actually have any, we're not making any dough on that. But if your contractor or you already have a plan with Verizon or AT&T because you like less bars in more places, then you can take our SIM, throw it in the garbage, put the SIM from your cell provider into it, and you're up and running. That simple. Okay, so it's a dealer's choice situation, but I know a lot of contractors feel good when they know they're putting a Hunter product inside of a Hunter cabinet versus third party, and I feel the same way. So we're there with this Centrellis software today, and when you add Wi-Fi, LAN, or cell, now you can add flow, right? And so you can have an IC2 with flow, real-time HFS, Hunter flow sensor, or the HydroWise flow meter, which I like because it has a wider operating spec. So if you got some small drip zones, that's the way to go. Every single thing you can do in an IC2, you can do remotely with Centrellis, all right? And there are now 2 predictive watering triggers on Centrellis. So it's not quite as evolved as HydroWise, but you can see the direction it's moving, right? Now, Reed, what's that old saying? Keep your friends close and your enemies closer. That's right. That's right. Does anybody know who that is on the screen? That's the enemy. No, Rainbird's not an enemy. Rainbird's like more like that little brother, you know, that you have to look out for. But anyways, I don't know why I said their name. Take that out. All right. So right there, that is the home automation specialist. That's my buddy Warren White. All right. What I would do if I was an irrigation contractor, I did this bit in Austin, Texas last week, and the night before I gave the presentation, I just simply typed home automation, Austin, Texas, right? Here's what popped up. Austin Home Systems, 4.9 stars, 96 reviews. I'm not going any further, but we can. Right here, Smart Homes of Austin, 5-star review, 99 reviews, right? I would immediately give one of these folks a call in your neighborhood and say, hey, I'm a green industry professional. I do a little bit of smart home tech where I install irrigation controllers on local area networks. Occasionally, I get in over my skis. Can I use you as a referral? Nobody's going to turn that down, right? But you, again, our contractors are going to be in a situation where they can't land the plane for the client. And the client's going to look to them as that subject matter expert that they've established themselves at and go, how do we get it done, right? I would rather have that professional in pocket. And it feels good, the whole sales cycle from the consumer side. That's how I met Warren. I was in Defiance, Missouri on a 400-acre estate where we had 1 primary Luxor and 9 satellites to light a 1.5-mile driveway. That's all we were lighting, right? And where the primary Luxor was, yeah, the economically exempt, right? Life's good. I wish I could have hunted there, man. There were deer everywhere. It was awesome. But anyways, it was a 1/4 mile from where the Luxor was to the primary residence. Warren comes out, and in a half a day, he puts a pole up at the primary residence, and it almost looked like a solar panel, right? And then a 1/4 mile away, right by that Luxor, he put another 8-foot pole up with what looked like another solar panel, and he shot point-to-point Wi-Fi a 1/4 mile at lightning speed. So there are folks out there with that skill set, right? And you're going to get in situations where you can't do it, and that's okay, but you got to be able to marry your customer up with somebody that can do that solution. That took me 30 seconds to find out who the best in that area were. Very simple, all right? So now I'm going to brush over this because it doesn't happen that much. So I've been belittled by many IT specialists. I call this IP address and MAC address for cavemen, all right? Or cave women, cave people, all right? So the MAC address, think about this. Every piece of hardware in the world, your smartphone, your computer, the MAC address is the name for that device. It's unique to just that device. No other device has that same address. It's like your social security number, if you will. So in this case, for example purposes, it's my good buddy, Mr. Mike Honcho, right? Now, the IP address is where you live on the network. And y'all don't need to worry about it because 99.9% of the time, you're going to install a HydroWise controller. The IP address is what we call dynamic, and it's self-created and generated. But occasionally, if you're doing a college campus or a big business or something like that, the IT professional's got to get involved and show their importance because they're paying them a lot of money. And he's going to ask you, can I put in a static IP address for that hardware? That means he wants to physically tell that hardware where it lives on his network. And if you're installing HydroWise, the answer is yes, absolutely. Not the X2, that's diet HydroWise. Any HydroWise with the touchscreen display, you can walk up to it, go under settings, and manually enter the IP address, a static one, where it will remain there, and that's where it lives. So MAC address is who you are, IP address is where you live on the network, all right? Just basic, simple terms. Now, this is my favorite. Let's pretend that over on the left, the internet is that discotheque. Now, by a show of hands, how many of y'all have gone to the honky-tonk, the gin mill, the nightclub, the discotheque at some stage in the game? Nobody? All right, liars. No, all right, I did. Now, fun fact, I'm one of 3 boys, and we're all 3 years apart, and then I'm the middle one. So when my older brother Lou turned 21, I actually turned 21 as well. Only there was a little bit of a problem. Lou was 4 inches taller than I am. Not really, because I'm a solution guy. I got platform shoes, and I was right in the nightclub, right? But for me, when I went out to the nightclub, because I lack aesthetic appeal, right? The door guy typically didn't just let me right in. I had to do what was called the Chicago handshake. Anybody familiar with that? That's right. Well, so at the time, I was a child of the 90s, I would have to take a $20 bill, fold it exactly 3 times, and place it tap dead center in my palm, and I would walk up to that guy and give him the old palm press. Occasionally, I might have the right ratio of guy to girl with me, where, you know, if I had 7 or 8 ladies, I might get in without the palm press, but I'd give them that old palm press and disco, all right? That is 19-year-old Kevin, and that is a latex rubber shirt. Don't judge. Don't judge. It was the 90s. But I'm telling you right now, look at the hairline on that kid. If you want to get out of this industry, you can see what it does to you, all right? No, that's not a belly. No, not at all. No. All right. Now, the reason I give you that little story is because it is a neurological fact that when you are laughing, you remember, all right? And I want you all to remember this, because remember, I am not a theorist, I'm a practitioner. I'm going to tell you about the bad stuff that goes wrong and can go wrong and will. Remember how I told you 70% of all cybersecurity attacks are happening residentially, okay? You can get into a situation where you have the right password, you have the right potency of bandwidth, and you have the proper bandwidth, and you put it in the controller, and the controller says, I'm connected. But when you look at the HydroWise app, you don't have a green check mark, and you can't turn zones on and off, right? It's like you're not through. And what's happening is ISPs are doing exactly what we want them to do. They are beefing up security for our data on our networks, and they're putting in firewalls. So even though you have all the right credentials to punch through, it's not letting you through to the internet. So what we need to train our customers on when these scenarios come up, and I will give you I will walk you through exact troubleshooting, but ultimately to land the plane, we need to provide the client with the MAC address, right? That is the Chicago handshake, which used to be 20 bucks and now is like 50, right? So the MAC address for any HydroWise controllers that we manufacture today is lowercase f, Foxtrot, 8, Foxtrot, 0, followed by the serial number for that controller. So everybody got that? So Foxtrot 0, Foxtrot 8, Foxtrot 0, serial number, no space, okay? Now, when you go hat in hand to your client to tell them this, can the client manually enter a MAC address? Let's just assume worst case scenario and that the client is very primitive and archaic. They can call their ISP up, any ISP, and say, hey, I just put a new piece of hardware on my network. It's connected to my router, but I can't get to the internet. Here's the MAC address. Any ISP can, within seconds, enter the MAC address for that hardware, and it punches it right through the firewall, okay? So we're aware of it. In 2021, I had one phone call for this. Alex Perez and I, it took us like 45 minutes to figure it out. In 2022, I fielded 20 phone calls for it. So if your clients are installing Wi-Fi on a regular basis and you know we want them to, they're gonna run into this. And when they do, we want them to be tactically prepared for the situation, okay? So troubleshooting 101, Kevin Lewis, he's not here, he's better looking, he's taller, he wouldn't need the box. But Upper East Coast, everything's quick and fast. We want answers, we want to solve problems. The only troubleshooting tool you ever need for this line of business is your smartphone that you're spending 5.5 hours screen time and you've been text messaging the whole time I'm talking. It's okay, I don't take offense. All right, when you get into a situation where clock says it's connected, but you can't get your green check mark, right? Don't take that controller off the wall and try a new one, all right? I'm not joking. I went to a job site once, and my buddy Gino had 5 controllers in a row stacked up, and he calls me Hollywood, right? And I get there, and he's like, Hollywood, hey, what's going on with these controllers? I looked at him, I go, Gino, I don't make these in my basement with a soldering iron, all right? The odds of you pulling 5 out of the box in a row and all being bad are slim to none. The moment that you get into that situation where you taught the contractor and he's like, yep, I got -60, it's the right RSSI, it's channel 1, checks all the boxes. I even put the password in, it says connected, but it's not. Step 1, unplug the controller. Step 2, pull out your handy, that's German for smartphone, okay? Scroll down in the settings till you see hotspot. And when you see personal hotspot, you turn it on. When you turn on the personal hotspot on your phone, it's like you are turning your phone into the modem and router. It is now the conduit to get that hardware to the internet, just like a hotspot would, that we talked about earlier. It's using cell data to get you to the cloud. What we're doing now is we plug the controller back in and you look for wireless networks and you will now see your mobile phone as a viable option to connect. So you tap on it. If it's password protected, you put it in. If it's not, it'll automatically connect up. And now from your HydroWise app, if you got the green check mark, you are good to go, and you know it's not the hardware, it's the wireless local area network. I will tell you, if that happens, it's about a 95% chance that it's a firewall and a MAC address issue. But that is exactly how you figure that out. That is going to be the biggest troubleshooting that any contractor goes through, and as long as we teach them the right way from the jump, they're not going to be discouraged. Because if that happens in their first or second install, and they look like an idiot, they're going to walk away from thousands upon thousands of dollars in market opportunity, okay? So that QR code, stance, approach, and tactics, right? Wi-Fi, what we need to know to look like a pro and help our customers and us, because the only way we get our 100 billion is through them. That will give them a link to watch it on Facebook. If you want to watch it on YouTube, I'm actually going to take this one that we did right here, and I'm going to upload it on YouTube. And then I'll send you all the link for that as well. All right? I'm just going to stop the camera real quick because the stuff we do in the next